When you picture the Amazon rainforest, you probably don't imagine cities. But new technology is revealing something extraordinary beneath the canopy, shocking discoveries that were completely invisible from the ground. But this shouldn't be possible. How could a civilization survive here, in a jungle so dense, hostile, and unforgiving? And yet the evidence says someone did, which means the story of civilization itself needs to be rewritten. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Michael. I have a degree in ancient history, and on this channel, we discuss the unexplainable mysteries of our past. Let's get into it. For decades, scientists told us the Amazon was a pristine wilderness, that it could never support large civilizations because the soil was too poor and the jungle was too dense. But new technology has just revealed something extraordinary beneath the trees, and if they're right, it means we've been wrong about South America's ancient past this entire time. But this never used to be the case. In fact, for the longest time, everyone thought the rainforest here was empty. Lost civilizations of the Amazon was the original ancient history conspiracy theory. In 1954, an archaeologist named Betty Meggers published a book that would define how we understood the Amazon for decades. Her argument was straightforward, and it seemed impossible to argue against. Essentially, the Amazon's soils were terrible. Because of all the tropical rainfall, there were no nutrients, leaving the ground depleted and acidic. You couldn't grow much on land like that, and if you couldn't produce much food, you couldn't support cities, organize labor, or anything we'd recognize as complex civilization, which meant there had to be only small populations, scattered villages, temporary camps. That was about it, and for years and years, the evidence seemed to back her up. Now guys, we talk a lot on this channel about moments when history turns. Printing presses, electricity, industrialization, and AI is one of those moments. Most people are still treating it like a toy, asking it questions, generating images, but the real shift is happening quietly in the background. Automation, agents, systems that work while you don't. And that's why I wanted to mention Outskill. They are the world's first AI education platform, running a live 2-day AI mastermind this weekend. And as part of their New Year upskilling push, you can join completely free. It's not theory, it's practical. In just 16 hours, building AI agents, automating workflows, connecting tools like Notion, Sheets, CRMs, and email so they actually do something useful. Now, it's usually $395, but for my viewers, it's completely free. This week only. People use this to save hours every week, some even turn it into income, but at the very least, it gives you literacy in the direction the world is clearly heading. There are limited free seats, so if you're curious, the link is in my description and in the pinned comment. And if you join now, you worst case spend a few hours learning about the future, or best case, you stop being blindsided by it. Thanks to Outskill for sponsoring. Now let's get back to the video. Archaeologists walked through the jungle and found nothing. No pyramids like the Maya built, no stone temples like the Inca left behind, just dense trees and soil that didn't exactly look promising. So they concluded that the absence of monuments meant the absence of civilization. Now, Meggers was very prestigious. She published for the Smithsonian. Her work became textbook material and her theories went unchallenged. But what no one realized was that the methodology itself was broken. Archaeologists were digging small test pits and looking for pottery fragments. They were searching for stone architecture in a place where people built with earth and wood, materials that decay in tropical humidity. But more than anything else, they simply weren't looking. The Amazon is an extremely difficult environment to operate in. Dense jungles, poisonous animals, tropical diseases. Seeing as it was known there wasn't any civilization to be found, it really wasn't worth the hassle. And anyone who dared to believe there was more to the story was dismissed, laughed at, written off. So if the science was that definitive, then why did anyone else think otherwise at all? Well, one of the big reasons is the accounts written by Spanish explorers in the 1540s, who claimed they'd seen something completely different. Francisco de Orellana and his chronicler Gaspar de Carvajal described settlements that stretched for 12 to 20 miles along the river without a break between houses. They reported roads so wide the Spaniards were afraid to follow them inland because they didn't know know what kind of huge force might be waiting at the other end. Provinces with 10,000 inhabitants, cities gleaming white in the sun, but no one believed them. You see, Carvajal mentioned female warriors fighting alongside men, and scholars latched onto that. It sounded just like Greek mythology, basically the Amazons, which just felt like an outright lie. So if he was making up stories about warrior women, he was probably making up everything else too. On top of that, Orellana was trying to secure funding from the Spanish crown, so it's possible he exaggerated the wealth and population to make the region sound more valuable. Then, in 1637, nearly a century after Orellana, another expedition, led by Pedro Teixeira, travelled the same route, but they found far fewer people, just scattered groups, and certainly nothing like the dense populations Orellana had described, which pretty much sealed it. That was it, proof that Orellana had lied. But what no one understood was the gap between those expeditions. In just those 100 years, European diseases had swept through the Amazon. Smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus. Mortality rates in some areas reached 95%. So Orellana had seen a living civilization at its peak in 1542. Teixeira had seen the ruins left behind after a century of catastrophic collapse. So the accounts were dismissed. Orellana became a liar. And for 400 years, the idea that the Amazon had once supported large complex societies was treated as fantasy. But the jungle was hiding something, and it would take a technology that didn't exist yet to prove that Orellana was telling the truth all along. It's called LiDAR, light detection and ranging, and although it was invented in 1960 and people began to use it by the 70s and 80s for mapping, by the 2010s it started to get used in commercial vehicles, and for historians and archaeologists it's incredibly powerful, a complete game changer. What it does is simple. An aircraft flies over the jungle with a laser scanner mounted underneath. The scanner fires pulses of light at the ground, around 30,000 to 50,000 every second. Then, when each pulse hits something, it bounces back. The system measures how long that takes and calculates the distance. Do that millions of times and you get a point cloud. Basically millions of individual coordinates that map the shape of everything below. But when a laser pulse enters dense rainforest, it doesn't just hit one thing. It hits the top of the canopy first. Then it keeps going, bouncing off branches and leaves on the way down. And of course, some pulses find gaps in the foliage and make it all the way down to the bare ground. The system records all of these separately. Then software strips away everything except the ground returns. So what you're left with is a digital elevation model of the terrain beneath the forest. Essentially, the canopy is gone, so you can see the actual ground. Now that's something walking surveys could never do. Archaeologists on foot can see maybe a few meters through the vegetation. Satellite imagery just bounces off the canopy. It can't really penetrate at all, and test excavations only tell you what's directly beneath your feet. You might be standing in the middle of a major urban centre and never know it. Plus, the Amazon basin covers 5.5 million square kilometres. Walking surveys would take hundreds of years to cover that, but LiDAR can cover 5,000 square kilometres in just 2 to 4 months. So when researchers finally started flying LiDAR over parts of the Amazon, they had a tool that could see through the jungle for the first time in history. What they found nuked everything we thought we knew. The first major discovery came in 2023, when researchers scanned over 5,000 square kilometers of rainforest and found 24 new earthwork sites scattered across 4 completely different ecological zones. They were geometric. Circles, squares, formations stretching over 400 feet across, and they had straight lines, right angles. In other words, patterns that couldn't have happened by accident. And the 2023 study didn't just find the 24 sites, it also used statistical modeling to predict how many more are still hidden. And incredibly, they estimate that those 24 sites represent only 4 to 9% of the total. Up to 24,000 undocumented earthworks could still be buried beneath the forest. But geometric earthworks are one thing. The question is whether those shapes are evidence of actual cities. In 2022, researchers published findings from Bolivia that answered that question. They'd mapped an area dominated by 2 massive sites: Cotacar, covering 147 hectares, and Landivar, covering 315 hectares. Both sites were surrounded by defensive structures, moats, ramparts, ramparts, some even had double walls, and inside those defenses there were U-shaped earthen platforms and conical pyramids standing 20 meters tall, built on artificial terraces 6 meters high. This was sophisticated stuff. On top of that, the structures all faced north-northwest, which tells us these people were choosing to orient their buildings in a specific way, giving us insight into how they saw the world. But what really stood out was the infrastructure. A single canal stretched 7 kilometers from a lagoon to the main settlement. That's not something a small group builds. That requires massive organized labor, extensive coordination, and planning over years. The settlements were arranged in a 4-tiered hierarchy, smaller villages feeding into regional centers, all connected by roads and canals. Then, in January 2024, another team published their finding from the Apano Valley in Ecuador, and the scale was staggering. They'd surveyed 300 square kilometers along the river and found over 6,000 residential platforms, each one roughly 20 meters by 10 meters, standing 2 to 3 meters high. These platforms were arranged in 15 distinct town clusters. The road network alone included 4 different types of pathways, and the longest went on for 25 kilometers. The population estimate was between 10,000 and 30,000 people, which is comparable to Roman-era London, and we've got a lot of evidence from daily life. Post holes from wooden structures, charred seeds, grinding stones, storage jars filled with maize, beans, and sweet potato. Starch residue analysis even showed they were brewing chicha beer. There's also evidence of drainage canals, terraced fields, rectangular plots laid out at right angles to control water flow. It's clearly all designed to produce surplus, to support populations this large for centuries. And if cities of this scale existed in Ecuador and Bolivia, you do have to wonder, what made all of this possible? Well, if you remember Betty Mega's idea from the start of the video, her entire argument rested on one claim, that the Amazon's soil can't support large-scale agriculture, which leaves you with depleted, acidic ground that could barely grow anything. So clearly something wasn't adding up, and that's where things get really, really interesting. Scientists have found something called terra preta, Amazonian dark earth, and it's not naturally made. Over 2,500 years, people in the Amazon mixed household waste into the soil, charred wood, ash, bone, pottery fragments, food scraps. They deliberately created layers of nutrient-rich earth with pyrogenic carbon, phosphorus, and calcium, creating all the elements tropical soils normally lack. Terra preta covers approximately 154,000 square kilometers, or about 3.2% of the entire Amazon rainforest, and these soils were exactly what was needed to support sustained agriculture and permanent settlement, the two things thought to be impossible. But it goes further than even that. Analysis of the forest itself shows that indigenous Amazonians domesticated at least 83 native plant species, including maize, sweet potato, cacao, peppers, and palms. And those domesticated plants appear 5 times more frequently around ancient settlement sites than in the surrounding forest. Useful tree species for food, building, and medicine are 5 times more abundant near the sites. So you can start to see the picture. The Amazon was a deliberately cultivated landscape shaped by humans over thousands of years, which means the biodiversity we associate with the rainforest is partly a human creation maintained through generations of indigenous knowledge. And that flips everything we've ever understood about ancient South America on its head. For decades, textbooks said that the Amazon could support maybe 500,000 to 2 million people in total. The evidence now shows 8 to 10 million. That's a big jump. We were told the Amazon was home to temporary camps, but the evidence shows large permanent urban centers occupied for 1,000 years. The assumption was that complex infrastructure couldn't exist here, yet we found roads stretching 25 kilometers, canal systems running 7 kilometers, ceremonial platforms 20 meters high. For so long, the Spanish accounts from the 1540s were dismissed. Orellana and Carvajal describe settlements stretching 5 to 20 miles without a break, which matches what we're now mapping. They described fine highways, and we found road networks. They mentioned cities gleaming white in the sun, which probably references fired clay architecture. All of this is looking more and more likely to be true. Now, just recently, in December 2025, 2 archaeologists from Missouri State University, Daniel Pierce and Chris Bodine, led an expedition into the southwestern Brazilian Amazon as part of their Gojira project. What they found was massive geometric earthworks in an area 1,000 miles north of any previously known Amazonian site. So if these structures are that far from what we've already mapped, it means these civilizations weren't confined to a single region. They were spread across vast areas of the Amazon basin. Pierce and Bodine are still processing the data now, but their goal is clear. They want to be the first people to identify an entire culture that lived there, a civilization we didn't know existed. Now, we've barely started with all this stuff. The Amazon may be one of the most sophisticated human-engineered landscapes ever created. We just couldn't see it until now. But that raises a question. If we were this wrong about the Amazon, then what else are we missing? Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing to my channel down below. I'll see you next time.